I have not slept in 500 years. The man said it like he was commenting on the weather, calm and almost bored, as if the weight of those years meant nothing to him. Emily Carter froze for half a second, coffee pot still tilted in her hand, a thin stream spilling over the edge of the mug and onto the saucer. The diner hummed around her with the usual late-night noise, plates clinking, a tired country song playing low on the radio, neon lights flickering against the rain-soaked windows. She let out a short breath, annoyed more than anything else. "Yeah, okay," she muttered, setting the pot down harder than necessary. "And I have not slept in 2 days. You do not see me making a speech about it." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his gaze made her chest tighten in a way she could not explain. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. Emily turned away quickly, grabbing a towel to wipe the spill, trying to ignore the strange pull she had just felt. She had seen all kinds of customers working the night shift. Drunks, loners, people talking to themselves. This guy was just another one, she told herself. But when she glanced back, he had not moved. Not even a little. His posture was perfectly still, his hands resting lightly on the table, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that did not belong in a cheap roadside diner off Highway 65. "You want anything else?" she asked, forcing her voice into its usual rhythm. "Food, maybe." He shook his head slowly. "I do not eat this kind of food." The way he said it was not arrogant. It was factual. Emily frowned. "Then why are you here?" A faint smile touched his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. "Because this is where you are." The words landed heavier than they should have. Emily felt it again, that strange tightening in her chest, like something invisible had just brushed against her. She scoffed, turning back to the counter, but her hands were no longer steady. Around them, the diner seemed to dim for just a moment, the neon light flickering harder, the air growing colder. A couple in the corner suddenly fell silent, both of them glancing toward the man without understanding why. Emily noticed it. She noticed everything. And for the first time that night, she wondered if this was not just another strange customer. Behind her, the man leaned back slightly in his seat, his gaze never leaving her. 500 years without sleep, he had said. Emily shook her head, trying to push the thought away. But somewhere deep inside, something whispered that he had not been joking at all. Emily tried to go back to her routine, but something had shifted, subtle and impossible to ignore. She moved behind the counter, stacking clean mugs, wiping down surfaces that were already clean, anything to keep her hands busy. The clock above the kitchen door ticked past midnight, the red numbers glowing faintly in the dim light, but every few seconds her eyes drifted back to him. He had not touched his coffee. Steam no longer rose from the cup, yet he did not seem to notice. He simply sat there, still as stone, watching her like time did not apply to him the way it did to everyone else. "You are staring," he said quietly. Emily flinched before she could stop herself. She had not even realized she had been looking again. "You are not exactly blending in," she shot back, grabbing a fresh pot of coffee more out of habit than need. "People usually blink, or move, or do something normal." She walked back to his table, setting the pot down with a soft but deliberate motion. Up close, the cold hit her again. It was not the kind of cold that came from air conditioning. It was deeper, like standing too close to a freezer that had been open too long, like the air itself had forgotten how to be warm. She rubbed her arms unconsciously. "You ever think maybe you should try sleeping?" she added, half joking, half testing him. "Might help with whatever this is." His eyes softened for a fraction of a second, something almost human flickering there before it disappeared. "If I could," he said, "I would have done it centuries ago." Emily let out a quiet laugh, but it came out thinner than she expected. "You really stick to the story, huh?" she said. 500 years. That is commitment." He tilted his head slightly, studying her like she was the one who did not make sense. "You do not believe me," he said. It was not a question. Emily shrugged. "I believe you need better material," she replied, though her voice had lost some of its edge. Around them, the diner had grown quieter. The couple in the corner had paid and left without finishing their meal. A truck driver near the window kept glancing over his shoulder, his fork paused halfway to his mouth, as if something was telling him to leave, but he did not know why. The air felt heavier now, pressing down in a way that made Emily's chest tighten. She noticed the door then. It had opened at some point, but she had not heard the bell. 3 men stood just outside under the weak glow of the streetlight. They wore dark coats despite the mild weather, their faces partially hidden in shadow. None of them stepped inside. None of them moved at all. They were watching. Not the diner. Not the other customers. Him. Emily followed their line of sight back to the man in front of her. He had not turned to look at them. He did not need to. "Friends of yours?" she asked, lowering her voice without thinking. For the first time, something changed. Not in his expression, but in the space around him. The light above their table flickered once, then steadied. The hum of the refrigerator behind the counter cut out for a single heartbeat before coming back on. The man leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to something softer, more dangerous. "No," he said. "They are the reason I have not slept." Emily swallowed. Her throat felt dry, her instincts suddenly awake in a way she could not explain. "You are saying those guys are keeping you up at night?" she tried, forcing a small smile, clinging to normalcy. His gaze held hers, steady and unblinking. "They are waiting," he said, "for me to close my eyes." A chill ran down her spine. Outside, one of the men shifted, just enough for the light to catch his face. His eyes reflected the glow wrong, too bright, like an animal in the dark. Emily's heart began to pound, slow and heavy, each beat louder than the last. She looked back at the man across from her, really looked this time, and for the first time since her shift had started, she felt it clearly. Something was not right. Something was very, very wrong. And somehow, without understanding how or why, she was already in the middle of it. Emily did not realize she had stopped breathing until her chest burned. The man in front of her had not raised his voice, had not made a single threatening move. Yet the space around him felt heavier, like the air itself had shifted to make room for something older than the diner, older than the road outside, older than anything she could name. She forced herself to inhale, slow and steady, gripping the edge of the table just enough to ground herself. "Waiting for you to sleep," she repeated, her voice quieter now, stripped of the sarcasm she had used before. "That does not make any sense." He watched her closely, as if measuring something invisible. "It does not need to make sense to you," he said. "It only needs to be true." Emily shook her head, but the movement felt weaker than she intended. She glanced toward the window again. The 3 men had not moved closer, but they had not left either. Rain slid down the glass in uneven lines, distorting their shapes. But their presence remained fixed, patient, like predators that understood time better than their prey. "Look," she said, lowering her voice even more, leaning in without realizing it. "If those guys are bothering you, I can call someone. Security, police, whatever you need." The moment the word police left her mouth, something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, not relief. Something sharper, something colder. "No," he said immediately. The word cut clean through the noise of the diner. A fork clattered against a plate somewhere behind them, and the truck driver by the window suddenly stood up, throwing cash on the table without finishing his meal. He left without looking back. Emily noticed that too. Everyone was leaving, one by one, quietly, without explanation. The diner that had felt comfortably busy just minutes ago was emptying like a tide pulling back before a storm. "You should go home early tonight," the man said, his tone softer now, but no less absolute. "Lock your doors. Do not answer if anyone knocks." Emily blinked at him, a mix of irritation and unease rising in her chest. "You do not get to tell me what to do," she said, but the words lacked their usual strength. He tilted his head slightly, studying her again, and this time there was something else in his expression. Not just curiosity, recognition. "You speak to me as if I am ordinary," he said. "That is rare." Emily let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. "You walked into a diner and ordered coffee," she replied. "That makes you a customer. That is how this works." For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was small, almost reluctant, but it changed something in the air. The pressure eased just enough for Emily to notice how tense she had been. "Emily Carter," he said quietly. Her heart skipped. "I did not tell you my name." The smile did not fade, but his eyes sharpened again, catching every flicker of her reaction. "You wear it," he said, gesturing slightly toward the tag pinned to her uniform. Heat rushed to her face, half embarrassment, half something else she could not name. "Right," she muttered. "That makes more sense." But it did not. Not entirely. The way he said her name had felt different, like he was not reading it, but remembering it. Outside, thunder rolled low across the sky, and for a brief second the lights inside the diner dimmed again. When they came back, the three men were closer. Not at the door, not yet, but closer than they had been before. Emily's stomach tightened. "They are coming in, are not they?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper now. He did not look toward the window. He did not need to. Eventually, he said, "They always do." Emily's pulse quickened, a steady drumbeat in her ears. "And when they do?" she pressed. This time, he leaned forward, close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him, close enough that the rest of the world seemed to fall away for just a moment. "Then you will see," he said softly, "why I have not been allowed to sleep." The words settled over her like a shadow. Emily swallowed hard, her instincts screaming louder now, telling her to walk away, to clock out, to leave this place and never look back. But her feet did not move, because something deeper, something quieter, was telling her that it was already too late. And across from her, the man who had not slept in 500 years watched her with an intensity that made it clear. Whatever was about to happen next, she was part of it now. The bell above the diner door did not ring when it opened. Emily noticed that first. The sound should have been sharp and familiar, a small piece of normal in a night that was quickly losing all sense of it. But instead there was only silence, the kind that slipped in quietly and settled into the bones. She turned slowly, every instinct tightening at once. The three men from outside were now inside. Water dripped from the edges of their dark coats onto the tile floor, but none of them seemed to care. None of them looked at the menu. None of them glanced around like customers. Their eyes were fixed on one person. Him. The man across from her did not move. Not even when the air grew colder. Not even when the last remaining customer at the counter grabbed his jacket and rushed out without paying. Emily's pulse thudded in her ears. "You said they would come," she whispered, her voice barely steady. "What do they want?" The man's gaze remained on her for a moment longer, as if committing something to memory. Then, slowly he stood. The movement was smooth, controlled, almost too precise to be natural. He straightened his coat, his posture shifting in a way that made him seem taller, sharper, more defined. Like he had just stepped into himself for the first time since she met him. "They want me to sleep," he said. The three men began to walk forward in unison. Their footsteps were soft, almost synchronized, but each step carried a weight that pressed against Emily's chest. She took a step back without thinking, her hand brushing against the edge of the counter behind her. "And if you do?" she asked. The man turned slightly, just enough for her to see his profile. For a fraction of a second, the overhead light caught his eyes. They were not gray anymore. They burned with a deep, unnatural crimson, like embers hidden beneath ash. Emily's breath caught. "Then I do not wake up," he answered. The words were simple, final. The first of the three men stopped a few feet away. Up close, his face was wrong in a way Emily could not fully explain. Too still, too perfect. His eyes reflected the light like glass, not like something alive. "My king," he said, his voice low and controlled. The word hit Emily harder than anything else that night. "My king." She looked between them, her mind struggling to catch up, to make sense of something that refused to fit into anything normal. "You should not be here," the man continued. "The council has made its decision." The air shifted again, not colder this time, heavier, like something invisible had just stepped into the room. Emily's fingers curled against the counter, grounding herself as best she could. She did not understand what was happening, but she understood enough to know that it was real. The man beside her spoke without raising his voice. "The council does not decide when I rest." There was no anger in his tone, no strain, just quiet certainty. The second man moved then, circling slightly, positioning himself between the door and the windows. The third remained near the entrance, blocking it completely. They were not here to talk. They were here to make sure there was nowhere to run. Emily's heart raced. "This is insane," she whispered under her breath. "This is not real." But it was. Every second of it. The first man took another step forward. 500 years is long enough," he said. "You know what happens if you continue." The man Emily had been serving for the past hour tilted his head slightly, as if considering the statement. Then his gaze shifted, not to the men, but back to her. For a brief moment, everything else faded. The tension, the fear, the impossible weight in the air. It was just his eyes on hers again. And this time, she saw something she had not seen before. Not just power. Not just danger. Something deeper. Something tired. Emily, he said quietly. Her name sounded different again. Like it carried meaning she did not understand. Step back. Her body reacted before her mind could argue. She moved, one step, then another, until her back pressed fully against the counter. The distance between them felt suddenly vast. The man turned fully now, facing the three figures in black. And in that moment, the last piece of normal shattered. The lights above flickered once, twice, then steadied. But everything else had changed. He was no longer just a strange customer sitting in a diner. He stood there like something carved out of time itself. Ancient, unmoving, absolute. You have been patient, he said to them. But your wait ends tonight. The first man's expression did not change. Yes, he replied. It does. And for the first time since this began, Emily understood something with terrifying clarity. Whatever they were about to do, it had nothing to do with the diner. Nothing to do with the night. It was something that had been waiting for centuries. And somehow, she had just walked straight into the middle of it. The silence broke without warning. It did not shatter like glass or explode like thunder. It simply vanished, replaced by movement too fast for Emily's eyes to fully follow. One moment the three men stood still. The next, the one closest to the table stepped forward with impossible speed, his hand reaching toward the man she had been serving all night. Emily gasped, her fingers gripping the counter as her body locked in place. But before the man could touch him, everything stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. The reaching hand froze inches away, suspended in the air as if the world itself had been paused. The overhead lights dimmed again, casting long shadows across the empty diner. The hum of the refrigerator cut out completely this time. Even the rain outside seemed to hang in place against the glass. Emily's heart pounded, loud and frantic, the only sound she could hear. And in the center of it all, he moved. Slowly, deliberately, untouched by whatever had just taken hold of everything else. He stepped around the frozen figure, his expression calm, almost distant, as if this was nothing more than an inconvenience. I warned you, he said quietly. His voice carried in the unnatural stillness, clear and absolute. The frozen man's eyes shifted. Just his eyes. Fear flashed through them, sharp and unmistakable. My king, he managed, his voice strained, like it had to fight through something invisible just to exist. You cannot keep doing this. The man who had not slept in 500 years tilted his head slightly. And yet, he replied, I have. Emily's breath came in shallow bursts. Her mind struggled to understand what she was seeing. Time had stopped, or something close to it, and he was the only one still moving inside it. Her gaze dropped to his hands. They were steady, perfectly still, not a single tremor, not a single sign of strain. This was not new to him. This was control. The second man tried to move, his body resisting whatever held it in place. His coat shifted slightly, fabric tightening as he pushed against the invisible force. You are weakening, he said through clenched teeth. We can feel it. The longer you remain awake, the closer you get to breaking. The man turned toward him, his crimson eyes steady and unblinking. You mistake endurance for weakness, he said. Then, for the first time, something in his voice changed. Not louder, not harsher, just deeper, older. I have outlived empires. I have watched oceans move and cities fall. You think I fear another night without sleep. The third man, still near the door, managed to take a single step forward. The motion was slow, forced, like pushing through water. This is not about fear, he said. It is about what happens when you finally close your eyes. The words lingered in the frozen air. Emily felt them settle somewhere deep inside her chest. Because she understood now. Not fully, not completely, but enough. This was not just about him staying awake. It was about what would happen if he did not. The man's gaze shifted again, back to her. Even with the world suspended around them, that connection remained unchanged. Immediate. Unavoidable. You should not be seeing this, he said quietly. Emily shook her head, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. Too late for that. Something almost like amusement touched his expression. Brief. Fleeting. Then it was gone. He stepped closer to her, closing the distance between them in a way that made her pulse spike again. The cold that surrounded him wrapped around her, sharp and absolute, but she did not pull away. She could not. Listen carefully, he said. When this ends, you will walk out that door, and you will not look back. Emily swallowed hard. And you? For a moment, he did not answer. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw it again. That deep, quiet exhaustion that did not belong to someone who claimed power over time itself. I will finish what began long before you were born, he said. The air trembled. A low crack ran through the silence, like ice beginning to break. The frozen figures around them shuddered, their bodies straining harder against the force that held them. Time was starting to move again. Whatever he had done, it was not meant to last. The first man's hand twitched, inching closer once more. The second's foot shifted forward another fraction. The third's eyes locked onto Emily now, sharp and calculating. They had noticed her. Really noticed her. You are not leaving, the man near the door said, his voice gaining strength as the stillness weakened. Not anymore. Emily's breath hitched. Fear surged through her, raw and immediate. She looked back at the man beside her, searching his face for something, anything that made sense. But what she found instead was something far more terrifying. Certainty. The world snapped back into motion. The lights flickered violently. The hum of the diner roared back to life. The rain slammed against the windows again. And in that single instant, everything that had been held in place came crashing forward at once. The three men moved. Fast. Precise. And this time, nothing stopped them. Everything happened at once. The three men surged forward, their movements no longer restrained, no longer slowed by whatever force had held them back before. The first reached for him with speed that blurred, his hand cutting through the air with lethal precision. But he was faster. He did not step away. He did not retreat. He simply shifted, a slight turn of his body, and the attack passed through empty space where he had been a fraction of a second before. The second man came from the side, aiming to close the distance, to trap him between them. The third moved toward Emily. That was what broke something inside him. The air snapped cold, not like before, not subtle, but sharp and absolute, like winter crashing into the room without warning. Do not touch her, he said. The words were quiet. They did not need to be louder. The third man froze mid-step, his body locking for just a moment, enough to hesitate, enough to shift his focus back to the one they had come for. She is irrelevant, the man near the door replied, though his voice had lost a fraction of its certainty. Then keep her that way, he answered. Emily's back pressed harder against the counter, her breath coming fast now, her pulse racing as she watched the impossible unfold just feet away from her. Plates rattled on the shelves behind her. The coffee machine hissed and sputtered as the pressure in the air seemed to warp everything around it. This was no longer a confrontation. This was something else entirely. The first man attacked again, faster this time, his movements calculated, relentless. The second followed, coordinating with him in a way that spoke of long practice, of countless battles fought before this one. They were not human. That much was clear now. But neither was he. He moved through them like shadow through light, precise, controlled, every motion deliberate. He did not waste energy. He did not rush. Each step, each turn, carried weight, purpose, and something older than anything Emily had ever seen. The first man lunged again, his hand finally brushing against his sleeve. The moment contact was made, the air cracked. A sharp, invisible force pushed outward, throwing the man back across the diner. He slammed into a booth with enough force to splinter the wood, the sound echoing through the empty space. Emily gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The second man did not hesitate. He closed in, his movements sharper now, more desperate. You are weakening, he said, his voice strained. We can feel it. You cannot hold this forever. For the first time, there was a pause. Not long, not obvious, but Emily saw it. A fraction of a second where his movement slowed, where his shoulders lowered just slightly, where the weight he carried became visible. He was tired, not in the way people were tired after a long shift or a sleepless night. Something deeper, something that had been building for far too long. The third man took advantage of it. He moved again, not toward him this time, but toward Emily. Fast, silent, intent clear. Emily barely had time to react. She pushed herself off the counter, stumbling back, her heel catching against the tile. The man was already there. His hand reached for her arm, fingers inches away. No, she whispered, her voice breaking. And then he was there. Between them. He did not move fast this time. He was simply there. One moment the space was empty. The next, he stood between her and the man, his back to her, his presence filling the space completely. The man's hand stopped inches from his chest. Not because he chose to stop, because he could not go any further. You were told, he said quietly, to leave her out of this. The man's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking past him to Emily for a fraction of a second before returning. She is already in it, he replied. The truth of it settled heavily in the air. Emily felt it in her bones. There was no stepping back now. No walking away. Whatever line had existed before was gone. The man in front of her straightened slowly, his posture shifting again. That same transformation she had seen before, but stronger now, more complete. The tiredness did not disappear, but something else rose with it. Authority. Power. Something that made the room itself seem to bend around him. Then I will end this quickly, he said. The words were not a threat. They were a decision. The lights above flickered violently, casting sharp shadows across the broken diner. Outside, thunder cracked, loud and immediate, shaking the glass. And for the first time since this began, Emily understood something with absolute clarity. These men were not the most dangerous thing in the room. He was. The moment he said he would end it, something shifted in the room that Emily felt more than saw. The air did not just grow colder. It grew heavier, like the diner itself had been pulled deeper into something unseen. The three men felt it too. She could see it in the way their movements slowed for just a fraction of a second, in the way their eyes sharpened, recalculating. They were no longer advancing with confidence. They were adjusting. The one who had been thrown across the diner pushed himself up from the shattered booth, wood cracking beneath his grip as he rose. His expression was no longer calm. It was tight, controlled, but there was something else beneath it now. Caution. You should not do this here, he said, his voice low but steady. Not in front of her. Emily's breath caught. Not in front of her. Like she was something that mattered. Like she was something that changed the rules. The man standing between her and them did not turn his head, but she knew he had heard it. You brought this here, he replied. You do not get to choose where it ends. The second man shifted to the side, trying to flank him again, but this time his movement was slower, more deliberate. You are already at the edge, he said. We can feel it. The longer you resist, the worse it becomes. For you. For everyone around you. The words lingered. For everyone around you. Emily felt that one land somewhere deep inside her. She did not understand why, but it felt like a warning that had been meant for her as much as for him. The third man, the one who had reached for her, did not move again. He stayed where he was, watching, his eyes no longer dismissing her, studying her, as if trying to understand something that did not fit. Why her? He asked suddenly. The question cut through the tension, sharp and unexpected. Out of all the places, all the nights, why this one? Why her? Emily's heart skipped. She did not know the answer. She was not even sure she wanted to hear it. The man in front of her was silent for a moment. Then, slowly he spoke. I did not choose her. His voice was quieter now. Not weaker. Just different. She spoke to me. The simplicity of it made no sense. And yet, somehow, it felt like the most important thing that had been said all night. The first man stepped forward again, his movements cautious now, measured. That is exactly the problem, he said. You are reacting. After 500 years of control, you are reacting to a human. The word human hung in the air like a dividing line. Emily felt it clearly now. Whatever they were, whatever he was, she was not part of it. And yet, somehow, she was at the center of it. You think this is about her, the man replied, his tone sharpening slightly. It is not. But the way his eyes flicked toward her, just for a fraction of a second, told a different story. The second man noticed it too. Emily saw the shift in his expression, the way his focus narrowed, the way his posture adjusted. He had found something. Then step away from her, he said. If she means nothing, step away. Silence fell again. Heavy. Pressing. Emily's breath came shallow as she looked at the man in front of her, waiting without meaning to, her entire body. Tense. For a moment, it seemed like he might. Like he might take that step, put distance between them, prove that she was nothing more than a coincidence in a long and endless night. But he did not move. Not an inch. The answer was in the stillness. The third man's expression hardened. Then she is the key, he said. Everything changed again. The tension snapped tighter, sharper, like a wire pulled too far. The first man moved instantly, no longer testing, no longer cautious. This time, he was not reaching for him. He was reaching for Emily. The world seemed to slow for her, every movement stretching out, every second dragging as her mind struggled to keep up. She saw it coming. She knew she could not move fast enough. And then something impossible happened. Before the man's hand could reach her, before the distance could close, a shock ran through her body. Not pain. Not exactly. Something deeper. Like a sudden pulse of heat beneath her skin. The man's hand stopped mid-air, his expression twisting in confusion. His eyes dropped to her wrist. Emily followed his gaze. And for the first time, she saw it. Faint. Glowing just beneath her skin. A mark. Intricate. Ancient. The same shape that had flickered for a moment earlier when she had touched him. The diner went completely still again. Not because time had stopped, but because everything in the room had just realized the same thing at once. She was not supposed to have that. And across from her, the man who had not slept in 500 years closed his eyes for the briefest moment, as if something he had feared, or something he had been waiting for, had just become real. The glow beneath Emily's skin pulsed once, faint but undeniable, like a heartbeat that did not belong to her. She stared at her wrist, her breath catching as the intricate lines shimmered just beneath the surface, then dimmed, as if whatever had awakened there was deciding whether to reveal itself or hide again. The man in front of her did not move for a full second. His eyes remained closed, his expression tightening in a way she had not seen before. Not anger, not fear, something closer to recognition. When he opened his eyes again, the crimson was deeper, sharper, like something inside him had shifted to meet whatever had just appeared in her. The three men felt it too. Emily saw it in the way they stepped back, not out of fear, but out of calculation, like a situation they thought they understood had suddenly changed. That is not possible, the first man said, his voice lower now, edged with something new. She is human. The second man shook his head slightly, his gaze locked on Emily's wrist. No, he said. Not entirely. The word hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. Emily's pulse hammered in her ears. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. I am just a waitress. I do not have whatever this is. No one answered her. Because in that moment, what she believed about herself no longer mattered. The truth was already written beneath her skin. The third man moved first, slower this time, careful, as if approaching something unpredictable. The mark is active, he said. That means the bond has begun. Bond. The word sent a chill through Emily's entire body. She looked instinctively at the man beside her. His gaze met hers immediately, and for a brief second, the entire room seemed to disappear again. I did not intend this, he said quietly. Emily swallowed hard. That makes two of us. But even as she said it, she knew something had changed. Not just around her. Inside her. The cold that had surrounded him earlier now felt different when it touched her skin. It did not bite the same way. It did not push her away. It settled. The first man straightened, his posture shifting as his focus sharpened completely. This changes everything, he said. You cannot be allowed to leave. The words were directed at her this time. Clear. Final. Emily felt her back press harder against the counter, her instincts flaring again. I was not planning on staying. She shot back, though her voice shook. The man beside her stepped forward slightly, placing himself fully between her and the three figures again. You will not touch her, he said. This time, there was no quiet calm in his tone. No subtle control. This was something else. Authority that did not ask. It commanded. The second man's expression hardened. You no longer have the authority to decide that, he replied. Not if the bond is real. Bond. The word echoed again, louder now, heavier. Emily's hand tightened into a fist, but the faint glow beneath her skin flickered again in response, reacting to her movement, to her fear, to something deeper she could not understand. The third man's gaze shifted between them, calculating rapidly. If she is linked to you, he said, then she is part of the condition. Condition. Emily's head spun. Pieces of something larger were forming around her, a structure she could not fully see yet, but could feel pressing in from all sides. Enough, the man said, his voice cutting through the rising tension. The lights above them flickered violently again, casting sharp shadows that stretched across the broken diner. The air dropped another degree, colder than before, sharper, almost painful. You came here to force an ending, he continued. You will leave with nothing. The first man's lips pressed into a thin line. We will not leave without resolution, he said. You know the rules. If the bond has formed, then it must be tested. Tested? Emily's breath hitched. She looked at the man in front of her, searching for something in his expression, some sign that this could still be controlled, still be explained. But what she saw instead made her chest tighten. He was not surprised. Not completely. This was something he had expected. Or feared. Or both. There will be no test, he said. The second man stepped forward, the tension in his body now clear, no longer hidden beneath calm control. Then there will be consequences, he replied. The word landed like a promise. Outside, thunder cracked again, louder this time, closer. The windows rattled, the glass vibrating under the force of the storm. Inside, the air felt ready to break. Emily's heart pounded as she stood there, caught between something ancient and something inevitable. She did not understand the rules. She did not understand the bond. But she understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever this mark meant, whatever it connected her to, it had just made her the center of something far bigger than a late-night shift in a roadside diner. And across from her, the man who had not slept in 500 years was no longer just protecting her. He was standing his ground for something that had already begun. The word consequences did not echo. It settled. Heavy. Final. Emily felt it in her chest like a second heartbeat, out of rhythm with her own. The storm outside pressed harder against the diner, rain slamming against the windows in uneven bursts, thunder rolling closer now, no longer distant. Inside, the air felt tight, like it had nowhere left to go. The three men stood in a loose triangle, no longer rushing, no longer striking without thought. This was different now. Controlled. Deliberate. The first man stepped forward again, slower than before, his eyes never leaving Emily's wrist. The bond is unstable, he said. It has only just formed. That makes this the only moment it can be broken cleanly. Emily's stomach dropped. Broken, she repeated under her breath, the word tasting wrong before she even understood it. The man beside her did not move. There will be no breaking, he said. The certainty in his voice did not waver, but Emily felt the tension beneath it now, the strain that had not been there earlier. He was holding something back, or holding something together. The second man tilted his head slightly, studying him. You are already weakening, he said. You stopped time. You pushed us back. You are burning through what remains. The first man's voice lowered. If the bond completes, you will not be able to resist it. You know what happens then. Silence followed. Not empty. Heavy. Full of something unspoken. Emily looked between them, her heart racing faster now. What happens? She demanded. No one answered her. But the man in front of her closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, and that was enough. He knew. The third man took a careful step closer, his movements measured, his gaze sharp. The condition was clear, he said. You remain awake. You remain in control. You sleep. You lose everything. He paused, his eyes flicking to Emily again. And now she is tied to that condition. Emily's breath hitched. I did not agree to any of this, she said, her voice rising despite herself. I do not even know what you are talking about. The glow beneath her skin flickered again, stronger this time, reacting to her fear, her confusion. It pulsed once, then again, like something trying to surface. The first man saw it. His expression sharpened instantly. It is responding, he said. The bond is accelerating. The second man moved without warning. Not toward him this time. Toward Emily. Fast. Precise. This time, he did not aim to grab her. He aimed for her wrist. For the mark. Emily gasped, instinct taking over as she jerked her arm back, stumbling sideways, her shoulder hitting the edge of the counter. Pain shot through her, sharp and immediate. But the man was already there, his hand reaching again, closer this time. If we sever it now, he said, his voice tight, focused, it ends here. Before he could touch her, the air cracked again. Not outward this time. Inward. Like something collapsing into a single point. The man beside her moved, not with speed this time, but with something heavier. Final. His hand closed around the second man's wrist before it could reach her. The contact sent a shock through the room, a visible ripple in the air that distorted everything for a split second. The second man froze, his body locking as if caught in something far stronger than before. I said, he repeated, his voice low, steady. You will not touch her. The second man's jaw tightened, his muscles straining against the grip that held him. Then you choose her, he said. Over everything. The words landed with weight. Choice. Emily felt it clearly now. This was not just something happening around her. This was something he was deciding. The first man's voice cut in, sharper now. If you choose her, you break the balance, he said. The council will not allow it. The third man stepped closer, his presence pressing in again. And if the balance breaks, he added, it will not just be you who pays the price. Emily's chest tightened. She did not understand the rules. She did not understand the council. But she understood what they were saying. This was bigger than him, bigger than her. And somehow, she was standing at the center of it. The man's grip tightened slightly, then released. The second man stumbled back a step, catching himself quickly, his eyes burning with something close to anger now. You hesitate, he said. That is new. The man turned his head slightly, just enough for Emily to see his expression again. The calm was still there. The control. But beneath it, something else had surfaced. Something conflicted. Something human in a way she did not expect. I do not hesitate, he said quietly. But the words did not land the same way they had before. Because for the first time since this began, Emily realized something that made her pulse spike even harder. He was not completely certain anymore. And that uncertainty, that single crack in something that had held for 500 years, was exactly what the three men had been waiting for. The crack in his certainty did not go unnoticed. It spread through the room like a fracture in glass, invisible at first, then impossible to ignore once seen. The three men felt it. Emily felt it. And most of all, he felt it. For 500 years, he had stood unchanged, unshaken, unmoved by anything that tried to break him. Now, for the first time, something had reached him. Not force, not power, not even the threat of what would happen if he failed. Something smaller, softer, and far more dangerous. The mark on Emily's wrist pulsed again, brighter this time, the intricate pattern sharpening beneath her skin as if it was waking fully. She gasped, clutching her arm as warmth spread through her veins, not painful, but overwhelming, like her body was reacting to something it had never known before. The air around them shifted again, but this time it did not grow colder. It grew unstable, like two forces pulling against each other, neither willing to give. The first man took a slow step forward, his voice lower now, more deliberate. You feel it, he said. The bond is anchoring. It is tying itself to your state. He did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on Emily, on the mark that now glowed faintly through her skin. It was not meant to happen like this, he said quietly. The second man let out a sharp breath, almost a laugh, though there was no humor in it. Nothing ever is, he replied. That does not change the outcome. The third man moved slightly to the side, adjusting his position again, cutting off any clear path to the exit. If the bond completes while you are still awake, he said, it stabilizes. That is the problem. Emily's head spun. Stabilizes what? She demanded, her voice breaking through the tension. This time, the answer came. Not from the men. From him. Me, he said. The word hit harder than anything else. Emily stared at him, her breath catching. What do you mean? He hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. Then he spoke again, his voice lower now, more controlled, like he was choosing each word carefully. 500 years ago, something was done to me, he said. A condition. A binding law. As long as I remain awake, I remain contained. The second man nodded slightly. Contained, he repeated. Controlled. Balanced. The first man's gaze sharpened. But if you sleep, the condition breaks, he added. And what is left is not something this world can survive. The words settled into Emily's chest like ice. She looked at him again, really looked this time, and suddenly the exhaustion she had sensed before made sense in a way that terrified her. This was not just about him being tired. This was about him holding something back. Something dangerous. Something that had been locked away for 500 years. So you just never sleep? She whispered. Ever. His eyes met hers again, and this time there was no distance in them. No mask. Just truth. Not since that night, he said. The mark on her wrist pulsed again, stronger, responding to his words, to his presence, to something deeper than either of them understood. The third man's expression hardened. And now she changes that, he said. If the bond stabilizes, it will override the condition. You will be able to rest. The second man stepped forward again, his movements tense now, urgent. And when you do, he said, whatever you have been holding back will be released. Emily's breath came faster now, panic rising in her chest. So what? She said, shaking her head. I am the reason he might fall asleep? No one corrected her. Because she was right. The realization hit her all at once, heavy and impossible to ignore. Her presence, her voice, the way he had looked at her from the moment she spoke to him. She had changed something. Without knowing. Without meaning to. The first man spoke again, his voice sharp now, final. That is why the bond must be broken, he said. Now, before it completes. The air tightened again, the tension snapping back into place, sharper than before. The second man moved, faster this time, no hesitation left. The third followed, both of them converging, their focus no longer divided. It was on Emily now. Entirely. The mark on her wrist flared brighter in response, light pulsing beneath her skin as her fear spiked. She stumbled back, her shoulder hitting the wall this time, nowhere left to go. I do not know how to stop this, she said, her voice shaking. I do not even know what this is. He moved then, not with hesitation, not with uncertainty. Whatever doubt had been there before was gone. In its place was something far more dangerous. Decision. He stepped in front of her again, his presence filling the space completely, his eyes burning brighter now, the crimson no longer hidden. You will not touch her, he said. This time, it was not just a statement. It was a command that seemed to press into the air itself. The lights above them flickered violently, the entire diner trembling as if something beneath it had shifted. Outside, lightning split the sky, bright enough to turn the windows white for a fraction of a second. And in that flash, Emily saw it clearly. The three men were no longer trying to control the situation. They were preparing for something worse. Because if they failed to stop this now, they were not just dealing with a man who had not slept in 500 years. They were dealing with what would happen when he finally did. The moment he spoke, the diner seemed to hold its breath. Not in fear, not in anticipation, but in recognition. As if something older than the storm outside, older than the building itself, had just acknowledged his command. The three men stopped. Not because they chose to. Because something in the air made them. It pressed against them, invisible but absolute, slowing their movements just enough to force hesitation. But this time, it did not freeze them completely. This time it cost him. Emily saw it. The slight drop in his shoulders. The fraction of a second where his balance shifted before correcting itself. The control was still there. The power. But the effort behind it was no longer hidden. You cannot hold it, the first man said quietly. There was no triumph in his voice. Only certainty. Not anymore. The mark on Emily's wrist pulsed again, stronger now, the light beneath her skin spreading faintly along her veins like a pattern trying to complete itself. She gasped, gripping her arm as warmth surged through her, sharper this time, almost painful. It was not just reacting anymore. It was growing. It is accelerating, the second man said. You are feeding it. The words landed hard. Emily looked at him, panic rising fast now. I am not doing anything, she said. I do not even know how to stop it. He did not look back at her immediately. His gaze remained locked on the three men, calculating, measuring, holding them back with sheer force of will. But when he spoke, his voice was lower. Closer. You are not meant to stop it, he said. Emily's breath caught. Then what am I supposed to do? For a moment, he did not answer. Then, slowly, he turned his head, just enough for her to see his expression again. And this time, there was no distance left. No mask. Only truth. Stay, he said. The word was simple, but it carried weight she did not understand. Stay? Not run. Not leave. Stay? The third man's expression hardened immediately. That confirms it, he said. You are choosing the bond. The first man stepped forward again, pushing harder now against the force that held them back. The air trembled under the strain, like something close to breaking. Then we end it here, he said. This time, they did not move separately. They moved together, perfectly synchronized. The first came straight for him, drawing his focus. The second shifted wide, circling. The third went for Emily again. Faster than before. Smarter. Not hesitating. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. She pushed herself off the wall, trying to move, trying to react, but the room felt wrong, like it was lagging behind her thoughts. The third man closed the distance in less than a second, his hand reaching for her wrist, for the mark that now glowed clearly beneath her skin. And then everything snapped. Not outward, not inward. Through. The man in front of her moved, but this time it was not controlled. It was immediate, instinctive. His hand shot out, not to block, but to intercept. He caught the third man mid-motion, his grip locking around his throat before the man could reach Emily. The impact sent a shock through the room, a visible distortion in the air that rippled outward, rattling the windows, shaking loose glass from one of the overhead lights. Emily cried out, stumbling back as shards hit the floor around her. The first and second men attacked at the same time. This time, he did not avoid them. He met them, directly. The first strike landed, glancing off his shoulder with enough force to crack the tile beneath his feet. He did not move. The second aimed for his side, faster, sharper, but his hand caught it mid-strike, stopping it cold. For a brief moment, all three were locked in place. Force against force. Power against power. The diner groaned under the pressure, the walls creaking as if the building itself could not hold what was happening inside it. Emily's breath came in sharp bursts, her vision narrowing as she tried to process what she was seeing. This was not a fight. This was something far beyond it. The man's grip tightened around the third man's throat, lifting him slightly off the ground. His eyes burned brighter now, the crimson no longer contained, no longer dimmed. "You were given a warning," he said. His voice was no longer quiet. It carried, not loud, but absolute, the kind of sound that did not need volume to be heard. The first man pushed harder, his muscles straining as he tried to break through. "You are breaking the law," he said through clenched teeth. "You are breaking everything," the second added. The man did not respond immediately. Instead, for the briefest moment, his gaze flicked back to Emily. And in that instant, something passed between them again. Not words, not understanding, something deeper, something that made the mark on her wrist flare brighter in response. When he turned back, whatever hesitation had been there before was gone. Completely. "Then let it break," he said. The words fell like a verdict. The air cracked. The pressure in the room surged violently, pushing outward in a wave that sent all three men flying back at once, their bodies slamming into the walls, the booths, the door. The impact shook the entire diner, glass shattering, wood splintering, the storm outside roaring louder as if it had been waiting for this moment. Emily stood frozen, her heart pounding, her breath caught somewhere between fear and something else she could not name. Because in that moment, she understood something with terrifying clarity. He was no longer trying to hold the balance. He was choosing to break it. And whatever came next would not just change the night. It would change everything. The moment the force exploded. Outward, everything changed. Not just in the diner, but in the space between seconds, in the fragile balance that had held for 500 years. The three men slammed into the walls with violent impact, wood cracking, glass shattering, the door buckling under the weight of one of them. For a brief moment, there was silence again. Not calm, not peace. The kind of silence that comes after something irreversible has just happened. Emily stood frozen where she was, her breath shallow, her body trembling as the mark on her wrist burned brighter than ever before. It was no longer a faint glow beneath her skin. It was alive. The pattern had spread slightly, the lines more defined now, pulsing in rhythm with something deeper than her own heartbeat. She could feel it, not just on her skin, inside her. The man stood a few feet in front of her, his back still turned, his posture unchanged despite the destruction around him. But something about him was different. The control was still there, the presence, but the restraint that had wrapped around it all night was gone. Or breaking, slowly, inevitably. One of the men pushed himself up first, coughing as he steadied himself against the broken booth. His movements were slower now, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "You have crossed it," he said, his voice strained but clear. "There is no return from this." The second man followed, rising with visible effort, his gaze locked on the man at the center of it all. "The balance is broken," he added. "You chose it." The third remained near the door, his form half obscured by the damaged frame, but his attention never left Emily. Not even now. Especially not now. The man in front of her did not respond immediately. He stood still, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Then, slowly he turned. Emily's breath caught. His eyes were no longer just crimson. They burned with something deeper, something that seemed to hold light and shadow at the same time, like two forces fighting for dominance beneath the surface. For the first time since she met him, she felt something new. Not just fear, not just awe, uncertainty, not about him, about what he might become. You speak of balance, he said quietly, as if it was ever stable. The first man took a step forward, despite the damage, despite the force that had just thrown him across the room. It was controlled, he said. By you. That was the agreement. The man's gaze flicked, just for a moment, toward Emily again. The mark on her wrist pulsed in response, brighter, stronger, as if answering him. And now it is not, the second man said. Now it is tied to her. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry, her mind racing. What does that mean? She asked, her voice unsteady but determined. This time, the answer came from all of them at once. It means, the first man said, you are no longer separate from him. It means, the second added, whatever happens to him will affect you. And it means, the third finished, stepping slightly forward from the door, if he falls, you fall with him. The words hit like a physical force. Emily's breath hitched as the meaning settled in. Not just danger, not just connection, fate, shared, bound. She looked at him again, searching his face for denial, for correction, for anything that would undo what she had just heard. But there was none. Only that same quiet truth. You should not have been part of this, he said softly. Emily let out a shaky breath. I think we are way past should not, she replied. The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything she could name. But it was there. And it changed something. The third man stepped forward again, slower now, more cautious, his eyes moving between them with sharp calculation. Then the outcome is clear, he said. If the bond completes, he will sleep. The second man's voice followed immediately. And if he sleeps, the condition ends. The first man finished it. And whatever he has held back for 500 years will be released. The storm outside roared louder, thunder cracking directly overhead now, the windows shaking violently as rain lashed against the glass. Inside, the air felt like it was tearing itself apart. Emily's heart pounded, her thoughts racing faster than she could keep up. She looked at him again, really looked, seeing not just the power, not just the danger, but the weight he had carried alone for centuries. And if the bond does not complete, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before. Then he answered. Then I remain awake, he said. And eventually, I break anyway. The truth of it settled over her like a shadow. There was no safe outcome, no clean ending, only choices and consequences. The mark on her wrist pulsed again, stronger, brighter, as if responding to the realization, as if pushing the moment forward whether she was ready or not. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, her breath steadying, her fear still there, but no longer paralyzing. When she opened them again, something in her had shifted. She stepped forward. Just one step. But it changed everything. The three men noticed immediately, their attention snapping fully onto her now. But she did not look at them. She looked at him. Then maybe it is not about stopping it, she said quietly. Maybe it is about choosing how it happens. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous at the same time. And for the first time since the night began, the outcome was no longer just in his hands. The storm did not slow. It did not wait. It crashed against the diner like the world itself was trying to break through the walls, thunder rolling so close now that the ground beneath Emily's feet seemed to tremble with every strike. But inside, something else had taken over. Not chaos. Not fear. Decision. Emily stood one step closer to him, her heart still racing, the mark on her wrist burning brighter than ever, but her voice steady in a way she did not recognize as her own. You said there is no safe outcome, she continued quietly. So we stopped trying to find one. The three men stiffened immediately, their expressions sharpening, tension snapping back into place. You do not understand what you are suggesting, the first man said, his voice low, controlled, but edged with warning. Emily did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the man in front of her. Maybe not, she said, but I understand enough. She took another small step forward. The glow beneath her skin flared in response, spreading slightly further along her wrist, the pattern becoming clearer, more complete. He watched her closely, something shifting behind his eyes again. Not just power, not just control, something deeper, something uncertain. If the bond completes, you sleep, she said. And if you sleep, whatever you have been holding back is released. She paused, her breath steadying. Unless it is not. Silence fell again. Heavy. Waiting. The second man shook his head slightly. That is not how it works, he said. The condition is absolute. Emily's gaze flicked toward him for a fraction of a second. Conditions are made, she replied. So they can be broken. The words landed harder than she expected, because even she did not know where they came from. But they felt right. The third man stepped forward slightly, his focus narrowing completely. You are human, he said. You do not rewrite ancient law. Emily's hand tightened, the mark pulsing again, brighter, stronger. Maybe I do not, she said. But maybe this does. She lifted her wrist slightly, just enough for all of them to see the mark clearly. For a moment, no one moved. The air itself seemed to hesitate. Then he stepped forward. Not to block her. Not to stop her. To stand beside her. Close enough that she could feel the cold again. But it was different now. It did not push her away. It settled around her, steady, constant. You do not know what you are asking, he said quietly. Emily let out a small breath. I know you have been carrying this alone for 500 years, she said. Maybe that is the problem. The words hit something. She saw it. The smallest shift in his expression. The weight he had never let show, finally visible for just a moment. The first man moved again, urgency breaking through his control. If you complete the bond, you risk everything, he said. Not just him. All of us. Emily nodded slightly. And if we do nothing, he breaks anyway, she replied. You said that yourselves. The truth of it settled heavily in the room. There was no argument for it. No way around it. Only the choice. The storm outside reached its peak, lightning flashing so bright it turned the entire diner white for a split second. And in that moment, Emily made her decision. She reached out. Her hand closed around his. The contact was immediate. The world did not explode. It did not shatter. It aligned. The mark on her wrist flared, light surging through the pattern, racing up her arm in a pulse that made her gasp. At the same time, something in him shifted. Not outward. Inward. The tension that had held him for 500 years cracked. Not violently. Not uncontrollably. Slowly. Deliberately. The three men moved at once. But this time, they were too late. The bond completed. The light faded. The storm outside began to soften, the thunder rolling further away, the rain easing into something quieter. Inside, the air changed. The pressure lifted. The man in front of her exhaled. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was there. The first real breath of rest he had taken in 500 years. His eyes closed. Just for a moment. Emily's heart stopped. But nothing broke. The diner did not collapse. The world did not end. Instead, something else happened. The weight in the room dissolved. The presence that had pressed against everything all night receded, like something finally released. He opened his eyes again. They were no longer burning. The crimson had softened, deeper now, quieter, controlled in a different way. Not forced. Chosen. The three men stood frozen, their expressions shifting from certainty to something they had not expected. Uncertainty. It is still contained. The second man said slowly, disbelief in his voice. How? The answer stood between them. Not in words. In what had just happened. He looked at Emily, really looked this time, not as a stranger, not as a variable, but as something else entirely. You changed the condition, he said quietly. Emily let out a shaky breath, her heart still racing, her hand still in his. No, she replied. We did. The first man straightened slowly, his gaze sharp, calculating, but no longer immediate. This is not over, he said. The council will respond. He met the man's eyes again, calm, steady, unchanged. Then they will find me awake, he said, and able to choose. The words settled, final. The three men did not move again. Not forward. Not back. After a moment, they stepped away, one by one, retreating toward the door, their mission unfinished, their certainty broken. The bell rang this time when it opened. A small, ordinary sound. When the door closed behind them, silence returned. Real silence. The storm faded into the distance. Emily stood there, her hand still in his, the mark on her wrist now dim, but no longer unfamiliar. Not something separate. Something part of her. He looked down at her hand, then back at her. For the first time since she met him, there was no distance in his gaze. No weight pressing behind it. Just something quiet. Something steady. You told me to stop being dramatic, he said softly. Emily let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh. You were being dramatic, she replied. He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile touching his expression. And now, he asked. Emily looked at him, really looked this time, and for the first time, she was not afraid. Now, she said, you finally look like someone who can sleep. He held her gaze for a moment longer. Then, slowly he nodded. And somewhere deep in the quiet that followed, for the first time in 500 years, rest was no longer something he had to fear. It was something he could choose.